Welcome to The World Today. I'm Waqas mAjeed Khan. Today we're talking about the United States statement. In fact, it was a statement made by General John Nicholson saying that the US is aware of Afghan Taliban's presence in Peshawar and Quetta, a statement that Pakistan has strongly rejected. This is going to be the crux of our conversation today. So let me introduce my guest in the studio. Joining me at the moment, we have Jan Achakzai Saab. Thank you very much, Jan Saab, for being here. Jan Saab, how do you take this statement emanating from the top US general in Afghanistan, saying that they are aware of these sanctuaries or the presence of Afghan Taliban in these two major cities of Pakistan, when we have clearly said that Pakistan is not using its soil for any kind of terrorism against anybody?
I think if I could name one person in the US administration who is very much aware of Pakistan's position on Taliban, on issues affecting Afghanistan, both Pakistan's public and private position, that is General Nicholson. However, having said that, since Obama administration is looking for a scapegoat, this is why he, next to the defense minister, would want to build on the same narrative and trying to pin down Pakistan for the failures of the US administration in Afghanistan. I think the failures, the main causes are within Afghanistan. It does not make sense when 40% of the area is being controlled by the Taliban. They would want to have Pakistani sanctuaries. It does not make sense that when Taliban have other sponsors like Iran and Saudi Arabia being giving them financial aid and ammunition, it does not make sense for them to have reliance on Pakistan when they have the option of diversification for their support. So I think this is simply one area where we are apart, we diverge with the US. Simply Pakistan cannot subscribe to US failed, flawed policy that is tactically resolving Afghanistan problem. Whatever you do tactically, how many troops you put in on the ground, how many boots, you simply reinforcing the strategic failure. And the strategic failure so far is lack of interest and lack of commitment and lack of willingness of the US administration to seek reconciliation in Afghanistan. Remember, Afghan Taliban is the legacy of the post-Bonn conference, when they simply left them out after the defeat of the Afghan Taliban regime in post 9/11, and that legacy continues to be that negative legacy. They could not defeat by deploying more than 150,000 troops. So how on earth they would be able to defeat them now? Afghanistan's geography, Afghanistan's neighborhood simply would not allow any tactical victory for the United States of America, and the sooner they understand, the better. But unfortunately, as Churchill has said, that the US has to try all the bad option before it comes to the right option. That is what we are witnessing in Afghanistan. Unfortunately, the same discussion we have been having over the last 2 years, and we are so back to the square one that we had seen 2 years ago. The same Haqqani network, main divergence of between the two countries, the same approach, whether it is strategic versus tactical, whether it's reconciliation versus military, and whether the problems of Afghanistan are the function of the domestic drivers or the driver of Pakistan.
Hold on to that thought. We've just been joined by Imtiaz Gul Sab, senior analyst on the line with us. Imtiaz Sab, how do you view the statement by General Nicholson saying that they know that there are Afghan Taliban present in Quetta and Peshawar?
Actually, I don't know why is the media making such a fuss about it, just because General Nicholson has simply reiterated what we have been hearing since 2002 from the American sources. Under President Obama, there was always this talk of the Quetta Shura and Peshawar and the Haqqani network. The only difference is that the Trump administration has now come up openly and basically placing demands on Pakistan and hurling threats of intimidation, of direct action, which could be possibly intensified drone campaign, missile attacks, hot pursuit. But this is I think, a reiteration of President Trump's statement that he gave a week ago. And I think Pakistan to put its house in order, gear up for possible actions by the Americans, by Afghans, or by Afghanistan, actions which could precipitate the security situation. So we have to be really on guard.
Well, how do you see Pakistan and U.S. Relationship developing in the coming weeks and months?
I think it all depends on how President Trump and his people would implement the stated policy of engaging Pakistan, but at the same time also demanding direct action against what they say sanctuaries in Pakistan. I think Pakistan has responded with the removal of sanctuaries, terrorist sanctuaries on the Afghan territory itself. So I don't think there is the signs, the vibes are good for the Pakistan-U.S. relationship. It might further precipitate in view of the intimidating posturing that is coming out of Washington as well as from the American Commander-in-Chief in Afghanistan. So yes, we should be basically waiting for that to happen between the two countries.
And what should be Pakistan's line of action under these circumstances, sir?
We should basically keep consulting countries like China and Russia for guidance. I think these two countries are known for their diplomatic wisdom. And this wisdom is based on calculated thoughts and not emotional outbursts that Pakistani leaders are used to. So I think we should refrain from sloganeering and chest thumping. Instead, there should be a very cool, calculated, cautious deliberation on how to handle the threats that are emerging on the Western Front and how to also manage the possible threats that may emanate out of India via Afghanistan.
All right, thank you very much for sharing your views with PTV World. Well, that was Imtiaz Gul Saab, sir. Do you agree with what Gul Saab was talking about, basically that Pakistan's response needs to be measured and unfortunately, as we've seen previously also, that we have a habit of knee-jerk and reactionary sort of responses. So do you think there is some room for that to be curtailed and that Pakistan will be able to have a very pragmatic approach to the situation?
Well, definitely it has to be a very cold, calculated and comprehensive response. We need to do our homework. We need to find out what is exactly the policy in there. There are paucity of information available as to what exactly within the policy, their tactical options they have got it, and how far India's role, the Trump administration has envisaged so far. So all we need to have the facts first. Second, the second best option is, of course, on Afghanistan. We cannot be neutral just because the Americans want to have India there. We simply have other options like engaging China, Russia, Iran. Very interestingly, at this stage, we see that Iran, Russia, China are at cross purposes with the U.S. interest in Afghanistan, are at cross purposes with the Indian interest in Afghanistan. In the past, Iran, India, Russia, they were on the same page in the 80s and in the 90s versus the Taliban. Today, the Afghan Taliban are being backed, sponsored by the Iran, India, and they are also being sought, after by the Chinese. And of course, Pakistan simply believe that they are the stakeholders, need to be taken into account for any, eventual resolution. This is why India and America are isolated on Afghanistan, in terms of regional countries, posturing. So I think Pakistan has got a great opportunity to work with these and also draw a line to the Kabul government. If it has to be a willing partner, it need to make sure that it leads, it owns, and even it controls, whatever it want to do it, but not at the cost of what it has been doing it, simply ignoring and favoring and perpetuating the status quo. The status quo means more instability, more chance for the groups like ISIS coming in, and also providing the reason for all other regional countries to be suspecting the intention of any other country, because at the moment Pakistan suspects that ISIS Khorasan is the product of India, Iran suspects that it is the product of the US, Russians suspect that it is the product of Americans. So all the great game is going on. This is why we are part of the solution to Afghanistan, whether the US wants it or not.
Right. We've also been joined by Zafar Nawaz Jaspal Saab with us in the studio. Thank you very much, Zafar Saab, for being here. Zafar Saab, we're talking about the statement from General Nicholson saying that they are aware of Afghan Taliban's presence in Pakistan. But a statement that also came out from the Defense Minister Khaja Asif, he said that we want to clear up misunderstandings with the US by maintaining our relationship. So a very pragmatic sort of a statement coming from the Defense Minister. How do you view the response?
I think that the Foreign Minister made a very clear statement. If I am not wrong, his statement which I read in the newspaper, he said that Afghan Taliban is Americans or a Kabul government problem, not our problem. And I think it's a very clear message to the Americans. Second is, if you see that the National Security Committee, in its meeting, they categorically stated that don't talk about billions and billions you had paid us. Actually, you are paying the shipment toll. That was very important. We never heard this kind of statement because as an ally, we were trying to pacify many things, whatever the American administration was saying. We were trying to work out with them because we understand one thing, that if we have to get rid of the transnational terrorist syndicate which is present in our neighborhood, we need to work with the Americans and other international forces. But the way the Trump administration or President Trump and his speech writers blamed Pakistan, I think that if you see that he used the word 12 times Pakistan, and every time he was trying to give a message or threat. Now, when the National Security Committee has given this, that whatever you were paying because you were using our territory. Our infrastructure from Karachi to Tokham or Chaman has been destroyed by the NATO or these US assistance trawlers or these kind of the things. So this is the first thing. And the second is that, look, it is a very interesting. When General Ayer was here, when he was meeting with our Army Chief, and I think Army Chief very categorically to him as well as the American ambassador told him that we are not interested in your economic assistance, we are interested in this, that you start judging the reality and try to admit that what we have been doing or what we did against the terrorist organizations, we are able to clear our territory. And at that time he was not pointing a finger towards the Quetta and Peshawar. Yes, there was a common saying in the American literature, Quetta Shura. There was a common saying that they have it was not a new thing. The Afghan refugees since 1979, their families have been living in these areas. Even if you identify that the members of the unity government, which is now ruling or governing the Kabul, those members' families you will find in these areas. Now, it's a very simple statement that border management, why you not control the border? If we are ready to control the border, Americans, NATO forces, 13,000, of course it's difficult with the 13,000 in addition 4,000, 17,000 cannot control, and the Afghan government. If you think that there is infiltration from our side, then you can make a 24-hour border management and watch list. When you are not able to manage the border, when you are not able to monitor the border for
or even willing to,
or not exactly what
that
you
is
said,
a better term.
They are not willing for it, then why you blame us? Second, we say that okay, we can go for get rid of these Afghan refugees, assist us in settling them in Afghanistan, take them back. If they are not ready to take them back, then what we can do? If anyone who is, can you identify that this person is Taliban or this person is not Afghan Taliban? Afghan is Afghan for us. If his family is here, as a neighboring, as a brotherly country, as a Muslim, we have to look them as the refugees. Whosoever under the cover of the refugee, even within this, when you see this, our Operation Radul Fasad, what is the primary objective? To get rid of or destroy the facilitators. But who are the facilitators? Our own brothers and sisters. So these are the realities. Americans, as earlier it was pointed out by my colleague, that very categorically, that they failed. They failed in Afghanistan, they failed everywhere, and now they are searching the scapegoat, and it's easier Islamabad and Pakistan. And it's very interesting. They said that India has did a lot of trade and benefited from the trade with US. It's correct that you can say the balance which is in India's favor is 25 billion last year. That it has a more exports, 25 billion US dollars. If the Indians can add one more billion, but we have to see that whether Hindwata troops will be going there. Are the Afghans going to accept? And I have my reservations if the Modi government will be sending any Indian troop there, within the unity government or Ghani's leadership, there will be a question mark.
No, but I don't think President Trump was asking for troops when he was talking about India. He just wanted economic assistance from India.
No. He was asking economic and proper, because he said that India could play a stability role. And you cannot play a stability role in Afghanistan without troops. He was saying that we are asking our partners and allies, that allies should also support, partners also should support, because Americans are not ready to permit him to send more troops. If you see that he used the term 4,000 troops for South Asia, why was not, in which country in the South Asia he has to send the troops?
Well, I
Only in
think
Afghanistan.
he's given the American generals a carte blanche, like they can do whatever they want, and if they feel that they
That
need
is only-
5,000
that
or
is a
4,000, whatever number it may be.
No. He said Americans, generals have given the permission on the ground. Basically, if you see that, the Americans have always tried to present themselves that to be, even when we launched the military operation, we are not ignoring the just war theory. Obama was always talking about just war theory. We were not trying to use the brutality as a mean in our offensive strategy. And practically they were doing this. But this time when he said that we are giving them an autonomy in the decision making on the theater, what will be the difference? It will bring more brutality. It will bring more bad name to the Americans. What is the exact point in his speech was that we don't want a mirror image of United States in Afghanistan society. So he's accepting this reality. They cannot change the culture. They cannot change anything there. They are only now looking for maintaining their presence in the heartland of West Asia, Central Asia, or this part of the world. Because when you say Euro-Asia, when you use the term, technically and practically, Kabul becomes the heartland for them. And that is the Americans have been discredited in Iran, as it was pointed out earlier. They are losing Pakistan, or they have lost practically.
Well, let's come to that, sir, because there were a number of very important meetings that were set up between the United States government and the Pakistani government, and all those meetings have been postponed. The Alice Wells meeting, along with the Khaja Asif's departure to meet Rex Tillerson, has also been postponed. Then there are another couple of meetings that were also postponed on Islamabad's request. How do you view this development, sir?
Well, obviously, it's not good for bilateral relations when Pakistan, with all the stakeholders, really don't want to have a confrontation, really don't want to have a deterioration of relations. But of course, Pakistan's self-interest is paramount in any bargaining and negotiations. The subtle message sent out by saying that the time is not appropriate. The message was very polite and diplomatic by the Foreign Office to the US side that we may not be able to receive acting assistant rep for this region, Alice Wells, and also the message was Foreign Minister Khaja Asif will not be able to visit Washington at this because of apparently Eid holidays. However, it was sending a message that if you send somebody who is not somebody who is calling the shots, who is just a low-key official, who are just here for the orientation of what we think and what we find out the pulse, so he or she is not welcome. So that was kind of a subtle diplomatic message, and the US side understood it. I think yes, Pakistan has not refused any deeper engagement with the US. Today, the story came up that Prime Minister Abbasi Saab would be visiting in New York to participate in the General Assembly meeting as well, and there are possibly sidelines meetings also being arranged by both sides. So Pakistan still does not want to ratchet up any rhetorics and any substance in terms of relations cooling off. But now it's really the ball is in the court of the US administration. If they means what they are saying it, then of course there are implications for this. As my honorable colleague said, they have lost Pakistan almost. The status of US in this region, particularly in the West Asia, as a neutral interlocutor has has been thrown to the woods. The third most important thing is that there will be implications for any partnership with India, not only in terms of Pakistan's reaction, but also other regional countries like China and Russia. That means any deeper involvement of the US and by extension of India means they would see the prospect of cost being raised for them, not only by the regional countries but also by the Taliban. then of course there is no exit strategy, there is no prospect of any respectful withdrawal eventuality, and also there is no concrete strategy to see any reconciliation effort going on, and with the Kabul government almost unraveling in terms of unity and its legitimacy already being threatened by the non-Taliban peaceful partners like Rashid Dostum and the rest, there is a likelihood that the government simply collapse on its own weight, because other non-Taliban partners simply do not want to continue with the illegitimate government that has not been legitimized by holding this jirga when the US had the then Secretary of State Mr. John Kerry had a temporary arrangement. So it should have been followed by Loya jirga endorsing the power sharing agreement between the two factions, and also it should have followed by the parliamentary election which did not take place, and now we will see general election as per the statute book next year. So now the real question for the Americans is that would they continue to tolerate a government which has been deprived of its legitimacy in the eyes of its own partners. So this is a big challenge that the US would be up against. So it's not an easy and walkover just because Trump wants to defeat the Taliban. It's not a walk in the park.
Right. And moving forward, what about Pakistan's logistical support to the US? Now, if we see the kind of narrative or the kind of attitude is being shown towards Pakistan from the US, what kind of chips does Pakistan have to play? Because we have been supporting them logistically, making it easy for them to access Afghanistan. So all those things will also be now up in the air? Or do you think that there is some kind of a bilateral arrangement through which that may continue? What is Pakistan's option in this scenario?
I think that we have to be very realistic about it. Neither we have any leverage over the United States, nor the United States have leverage over Pakistan. There are very minor areas where you can work together or understanding, or we have minor leverages. Americans have 13,000 troops, 13,300 troops in Afghanistan, and they can feed them, they can give them, and they are not in a combat mode, very limited combat operation by the air or these kind. They don't need the ground logistical support as we were. If we think that okay, we cut and there will be no, that they can manage it, and they can manage it even from the Iranian side, because Iranians have one point on the one side, and Iranians have other point on the other side. Iranians is the same state which was permitted by the Americans to cultivate their relations with the Taliban during the last 16 years. So we have to be very careful, and we should understand these are the realities. Secondly, Americans have no leverage over Pakistan because we are no more dependent on them. If we can say that which kind of assistance you are needing, it means that Pakistan has learned in the last 5-6 years.
But what about Pakistan's dependence on IMF and certain programs like that?
I'm coming towards that. They have a only way to indirectly blackmail Pakistan, and that is through the World Bank, through the IMF, or these kind of the things. Now, if you see that this World Bank, IMF, or this Bretton Woods, or this economic system, which we call it liberal international economic order. Liberal international economic order today, if you see it, Americans themselves are defiance of this liberal international economic order. China is today, you can say, establishing the ascendancy of this liberal international economic order. In a one way or the other way, they can put a pressure. But if you have to not forget, in 2011, after Salala, for 7 to 8 months, there was a complete cutoff when they were. So these institutions have limitations. Second is that reciprocity is very important. I think that this government has now adopted this strategy. Why we send our foreign ministers to the United States? Why? If there is a, you can say, state minister level or even junior to that person tries to visit, again you say that, sorry, we are not able to welcome it, that makes a sense. And that will be going to elevate the stature of our Prime Minister when he will be visiting, though he will be visiting in the United Nations. And the General Assembly is not visiting the United States, he is visiting the United Nations. And in New York, of course, if we maintain some kind of a clarity in our policy towards the United States, and the United States start learning that simple threatening statements, simple this kind of what you call it, unwarranted kind of decisions or policies or a threatening statement based on certain instinct, they will be not going to tame Pakistan. Naturally, they will try to engage our Prime Minister when he will be visiting there. You have to also not forget, within the United States, especially the Democrats, all the seasoned, what you call it, strategic analysts, they are very much disturbed with the President Trump's speech. They are criticizing. If you review the literature within the United States, there is this debate has started what he's talking about. And secondly, of course, we need the contact with the United States because it's one of the biggest trade partners. And within Pakistan, fortunately or unfortunately, in both ways I can say, that there is a very strong lobby, which we call it pro-American lobby. And we feel it that there are certain projects, there are certain areas where we need American assistance. But for the sake of Americans' goodwill, Pakistan cannot act fourth time as a frontline state. We acted in the 60s during the Cold War, during the Afghan job, during the terrorism.
At much detriment to
ourselves. Every time, once the utility of Pakistan expired, we faced the sanctions. We were, during the peak of Cold War, in the 70s we were under the sanctions.
Right.
80s we were a frontline state. In the 90s we were under the sanctions. Again we were a frontline state in the, you can say, first decade of the 21st century. Now direct or indirect sanctions. So why do we go for a fourth time? For which purpose? So these are the things which and now it's not an easy. United States is also, they have started realizing, but they have also identified that their primacy in the international politics has been compromised. They are dependent for Asia-Pacific strategy on India. To check the China's role in the Indian Ocean, though Drago Gracia is there, they are asking India to build, they are encouraging India to build. And when they build India, how they expect goodwill from Pakistan? So because our primary, why we were with the Americans, why we were bandwagoning with the Americans? We were bandwagoning with the Americans for our regional sovereignty or regional autonomy. And in that case, if they are building our enemy against us, then how we trust on them? And then if they are saying, and in the last 15, 16 years, the Afghan national security people, they were trained in India. And that's why we are facing now the problem in Afghanistan. What we are asking them in the quadrilateral dialogue which happened in the, I think, Tajikistan today, where army chief said to the Afghan general that we are ready to work with you.
Yeah.
It's easier for us to work with you, but we have to identify the modalities.
Right.
So simple blame game is not going to work.
But that was a positive meeting that took place.
Yeah. So it's a very important, many times it has been informed to the American friends by many Pakistanis, by analysts, by here and there, that yes, Pakistan will cooperate with you for the stability, for the prosperity of the region, for the stability in Afghanistan. But if you think that Pakistan will cooperate with, if you expect from Pakistan to cooperate with you for the establishment of the India's hegemony in the region, Pakistan is not going to cooperate with you.
Absolutely.
All the American policy, if you see, what he was saying, furthering strategic partnership, India's role in everywhere, then why we cooperate with them? Or for which purpose we are cooperating with them? Yes, there are certain areas where cooperation will continue, and Pakistan definitely try to maintain a good relation, because if we have a problem with the Trump administration, it doesn't mean that we have a problem with the Americans. We have a good friendships, we have a good will, but problem is that the Trump administration's the speech and the way out, we have to wait and see. And the way his journal has stated, what he was doing, why he was there and admiring 2 weeks back, what he was saying there and now he's saying. So these are the areas or issues on which there is a need, and frankly speaking, unfortunately, Americans lacks the awareness of the ground realities in Pakistan. Because there was time when the Americans used to come here, they used to visit the universities, they used to go everywhere, they were in contact with the society. Today, Americans comes like a voice-less representative, American embassy, meet some people in the drawing rooms, they go back. They have no touch with the society. And I have just read, I think John will be is more aware of it, political parties have a consensus on this Trump speech. Even they are opposing each other, they said that we need to give them a consensus.
Absolutely.
Consensual, you can say, some kind of response.
Everybody in Pakistan needs to be on the same page whenever dealing with any foreign country, whether it be the US, India, Afghanistan, or any other for that matter. But moving forward, sir, one of the interesting questions that has been asked again and again with no definitive answer in sight is that why is it that the Americans have not spoken about a diplomatic solution to the Afghan imbroglio? The most important, the only solution, which is a diplomatic solution, is not even talked about or discussed in the media. Everybody is talking about killing militants and fighting the war on terror, but when it really comes to solving issues, that is by sitting on the table and discussing the problems and ironing them out, we have nothing, complete deafening silence. So Jansab, could you please
Well,
shed some light on this?
I really believe that American strategic interests in this region overweigh any diplomatic solution to Afghanistan, challenge that they have it. What it means by saying, their strategic interest, they simply, they have noted that a new order is emerging in this part of the world. Multipolarity is emerging. Countries are realigning themselves. Americans' power and influence is somehow diminishing in this region. The Asia pivot is very much attractive to countries like Pakistan, and also the Chinese leadership is also kind of coming into South Asia. Look at Bhutan, Nepal, Sri Lanka. These were the countries when they had this unwritten constitutional requirement that they would put India first principle in their strategic relations with India. But now that's changing. Now with the Chinese leadership coming in, bringing in investment, economic cooperation, the coercive stance that the Indians would have it towards their smaller neighbors, except Pakistan, including Pakistan, is changing for good. So that means the Indians role is also diminishing. Now what the US administration wants is to introduce again a new partner, India, in Afghanistan, by introducing the same principle that in any strategic relations between the two countries, i.e. Afghanistan and New Delhi, it will be India first principle at the cost of Pakistan relation, at the cost of stability in the region. When already China is coming into South Asia, China was already in the Far East. They tried to chain China through Japan, South Korea, Philippines, and they are now trying to do it from the West. And what is the better place than Afghanistan to put in their troops for indefinite period? So the second strategic interest they have it, they simply don't want this Asia pivot either by the Russians or by the countries like Pakistan. The Russians have converged with China in order to oppose this unipolar world led by the United States of America, and also challenge them in Syria, now challenging them in Afghanistan and in Middle East. So that is something they want to check on. The third most important thing is, of course, this OBAR project that is very much Chinese interest to engage more than 70, 80 countries, and by extension they would have huge influence on that, while the Americans are losing because they are lost their position in South Asia as neutral interlocutors. In Middle East they are being questioned. In the West Asia they are being questioned because the geopolitical order they want to lead is by the countries who are hostile. I mean, for example, India in Afghanistan, India in Far East. So nobody would accept that, particularly the regional countries. This is why their primary interest is not reconciliation. That was the lesson from the Obama administration. During the last 8 years, our suspicion was, the Chinese suspicion was, that Americans are not interested in peaceful solution to Afghanistan problem. They never put pressure on the Kabul government to be more reconciliatory. They simply decapitated the Taliban leadership. They simply were lip servicing it. They only engaged the Taliban for the exchange of their troops, but not for reconciliation. Now they have enjoyed this leverage on Afghanistan. They could produce more than that. Pakistan was flat out working for reconciliation. The Chinese and the Russians, everybody wanted to see a peaceful neighborhood and in a way the courtyard. But it was the Americans that they were part of the problem. This is why today still the regional countries think that it's more strategic than any good for the region diplomacy that the new South Asia / West Asia policy entails, particularly by the Trump administration. And that is my assessment and my reading is that it's not just geopolitical. In politics there are no free lunches. You have to pay something to get something out. That's what they have been doing it. That is what the Indians have been doing it in their South Asian relations with their smaller countries, and that's what Obama administration has been doing it, and that is the intention of the Trump administration. They are after something.
So there's nothing new in the Afghan policy declared by Mr. Trump.
Well,
it's probably exactly the same as what Mr. Obama said.
One thing is very much new. What they want to portray is to scapegoat Pakistan. The word Pakistan
well,
is
that also was
there.
part of their narrative earlier when they said do more,
but
do more.
This time really they want to see some scapegoat, just like they use Iran for the Iraqian failure, like the Libyan. They use Syrians and a scapegoat for
or they use Iraq
Daesh,
was the biggest scapegoat
Daesh and
forever.
the rest. So this is why they always need somebody. And for the Vietnam, the Cambodia was the classic example where for their failure they were referring to Cambodia India as the same, they are referring to Pakistan as safe haven for Afghanistan. So that is, their tactical, the underlying principle. Whenever they feel disastrous, outcomes of their flawed policies, they simply go for the simplistic options so that they can convince the American people that, hey, guys, it's not we, it is X and Y, they are responsible for this failure, rather than we blaming for this.
Jaspal Sahab, do you think that the world generally has been buying America's excuses over the years? For example, when we saw America go to war in Iraq, blaming 9/11 on the Iraqis and weapons of mass destruction which were never found to this day. Do you think that the world is now wary of the claims that the Americans keep making from time to time in order to scapegoat smaller countries for their own failures?
I think that even within the United States, the Americans themselves are not agreeing what the American administration is saying. Because that's why I use the word the American public is wary of the war, 16 years war. And that's why he lacks the courage to say that we need to send more troops in Afghanistan in order to support our troops there. That's why he said that we have if you read his speech, there was a very clear message that we are ready to support Taliban negotiations. His state secretary became more clearer in his statement after the speech. He said that if the Afghan government and the Taliban wants to negotiate, we are ready to facilitate that. So it means that there is and in the case of what he was using the Pakistan, 4 things which we identified in his speech. First is safe haven, same in the previous speeches you had it. Earlier they used to say do more and get rid of them. He was saying this and he was threatening coercive attitude. Nuclear illogical terrorism, same. South Asia because of India and Pakistan challenging, same. What is the new thing for Pakistan? I use the word old wine in a new bottle.
Absolutely nothing.
Same. It's the continuity of the same policy. Only there's the new thing in this case is the reaction from the Pakistani side is more stronger, more clearer, and at the same time very much crystal clear to the Americans that if you are always blaming us, we are not ready to accept it. If you think that you had paid billions, you have not paid us in assistance aid, you have paid because of this. If you want to invite our foreign minister to come and talk, he is not we are a sovereign state, so it will be on a bilateral, and that's why you have said that we are not able to, or we are not comfortable to welcome in this week. Immediately what happened? President Trump's speech ended. Everyone was aware the signaling was directly and indirectly to the Chinese initiative, One Belt, One Road, Chinese initiative in the Indian Ocean and Southeast Asia Pacific, Chinese new route. And Chinese immediately got the message. And before our Foreign Office reaction was recorded or was given, Chinese reaction was there.
Well,
Russian reaction was there.
We had reactions from all the countries that
was
have
there. So
appreciated Pakistan's role.
Everyone is aware in the region that they are making Pakistan scapegoat. And this speech has exposed the limitation of the United States. Limitation number 1, Americans always launch military operation or these kind of things. At home, they always sold this idea for the sake of democratic values, for the sake of established principles. This time in his speech, when he said that we don't want a mirror image of United States, then what means? He's completely distancing from that. So this is the way we have to look about the American policy, and in that context, we have to not look this speech in an isolation.
Well, Jaspal, the question is that what can the regional countries do in the situation that we are now confronted with? Countries such as India, such as Iran, such as China, Pakistan, of course. Can there be some kind of a rational diplomatic approach towards solving the Afghan issue?
I think that Pakistan has maintained a very clear that there is Afghan problem, Afghan's own problem, Afghan should solve themselves. We could be a facilitator. Now, in this context, Pakistan's facilitative role become limited because India is there. Because the Afghan government is more inclined towards India and the other parties are inclined with us. And we have to accept this reality that with the passage of time, because of this do more and pressures and our internal insecurity, we are losing our influence on the Afghan Taliban. They are not our babies. They are a political reality in Afghanistan, and they accept sometimes, they do not accept sometimes. And frankly, they are not creating problems for Pakistan. So why Pakistan should hunt and go after them? Iran, Iran has facing a new kind of a problem, and Iran is coming. India has a strategic defense pact with Iran. How India is going to accommodate there? So this situation is very complex, but the trends are, or what you call it, have been. There's a new triangle: China, Pakistan, Russia. Russians have a contact with Taliban. Chinese have a contact with Taliban. Chinese have a contact with the Afghan government. Russians have a contact with the Afghan government. We try to, you can say, maintain a cordial contact with the Ghani government. We fail, but at the same time, we try to seal the border. Of course, we are facing a lot of crisis because of when you go for sealing the border.
Jaspal sir, would you recommend that the Americans should just leave Afghanistan, as was claimed by Mr. Obama when he came into power? Or Mr. Trump's campaign promise was to pull out all the troops from Afghanistan. What would be the result if that was
this will be too optimistic. Realistically speaking, Americans cannot leave. They cannot leave the heartland, and as a great power or as a sole superpower, it cannot leave, especially when it is playing a game like to contain China in the South China Sea, to contain Russia in the Europe. Can they leave the Afghanistan and make the entire region open for them? It's a real politic, or you can say a strategic competition is going on. Once again, we have been dominated by the realist paradigm rather than the others. Today, once again, military muscle is becoming a defining principle or a defining tool in, you can say, enhancing or pursuing the state objectives in the international politics. The only thing is that, are Americans sincere with the peace in Afghanistan? If they are sincere in the peace in Afghanistan, then they have to accept all the Afghan factions as a legitimate stakeholders. When they are not ready to accept...
Again, we're coming back to the same political solution that we've been
political solution means that.
But let's talk about beyond that. There are concerns that if the Americans were to leave Afghanistan all of a sudden, as has also been suggested, Jansab, what kind of implications would that have for the region? Because there is a huge ISIS threat also looming in this area, which is also perturbing the US and other countries of the region. So is it that simple that the Americans, if they were to leave the region, what would be the fallout from that?
Well, I mean, that is far-fetched in a sense that they simply cannot, leave for good, because they need to find a way to be, that exit has to be very respectful and peaceful.
But they also have the concern. They think that Afghanistan is a direct security threat to America's national security, because terrorist groups will find safe haven in Afghanistan.
Well, that is the narrative.
That is another
That is the narrative. But look at their
that are already there beside... whatever you say it earlier, that the Daesh, ISL, everyone is there.
So, I mean, even if there is not there, they can create it. It's not a problem. And look at the Syrian situation. I mean, a normal country turned into a ghost, country today. So what it means is that the investment they have made it, and also the blood they invested in Afghanistan, make it too costly for them simply to go, withdraw for good. If, for example, we say that the strategic interest does not outweigh the cost that they have invested bore so far, but what is important is that any semblance of normality without any sort of political reconciliation, it's almost impossible for them to leave Afghanistan. However, if they want to leave and declare victory, just they did it after the defeat in Vietnam, they have this option, they can do it. But of course, it has implications. Even in today, after 14 years in counterterrorism, Pakistan has been kind of helping them against Al-Qaeda, and they have not even completely defeated Al-Qaeda. The same is the case with the rest of the other militants. Look at the ISS, proper in Iraq and Syria. They are still there after 2 years. If, say, for example, we suppose that the US really want to finish them off, they are still there. And just because of this geopolitical new order and multipolar world, every non-state actor gets the sponsorship of other countries who have got some geopolitical showdown with the US, with the United States. In Syria, look at the role of the Saudi Arabia, of Iran, and of Russia. They are, kind of having their own non-state actors, simply do not, allow the US to take over or to dominate, the interest of the other regional powers. This is also likely to happen in Afghanistan. It's already taking place, as we have said during the discussion, that now every country, the regional countries particularly, want to have some foothold by investing in their relations, both state actors and non-state actors. And the plea could be anything, containing militancy, containing raising the cost for the US. So they are developing their own equities. So if they want to have some role on the table, or want to create some problem for the US to have a negotiating position somewhere else, they have to have these relations in Afghanistan. So a big game, playing out, but regional countries are directly affected by what is happening in Afghanistan and what is likely to happen, because any more troops on ground means more fighting, more guerrilla war, and more troops available to be targeted. So this is why that means more instability, more destruction, more mayhem, and countries like China, Pakistan, Iran and Russia will be the mostly concerned about. The US is very far away. They are not directly affecting in the sense that to accept the body bags, but for us it's just the next door neighbors, and we are already vulnerable in terms of our western border boiling for the last decade or so, and the Indians are there. They would use this opportunity to be there diplomatically in a big way, economically, and also in terms of security. Already more than 4,000 Afghan officers have been trained in India, and more than 2,000 officers are being trained as we speak.
And a number of Afghan officers of the Afghan army have been defecting from the army, joining the Taliban, or selling their equipment to the Afghan Taliban. So we leave it at that. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for taking out the time and being on the show. Well, you heard the conversation, and in conclusion, we'd always say that Pakistan wants a diplomatic solution to the Afghan problem. We want to help our Afghan brothers in creating a peaceful society right next to us. And with that hope and on that note, it's goodbye.